Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today we need to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Structured decks. Weird stuff has been going on in the game. We just got the final card from the new Blue Eye structure deck. I think this structure deck is set up to be a very successful one. It's got the anime aspect to it. It's got the Chars, actually more like the Pikachu of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like the most notable card support. It's actually competitively viable. It's kind of got everything you could ask for there. So I think it's going to be a very, very successful one. But we're also in the middle of a weird year where we only got one structure deck. And that's strange. That's a really weird place to be because from my eyes and maybe my impression of how these products go may be misaligned here. But I do, like, looking at these, they seem like easier products to make than most. Right? They come in a pre-packaged thing with a preset amount of cards, the exact same cards in every one. You just pump them out, right? They don't have to worry about randomizing stuff. They don't have to worry about, doing individual packs. This is like one easy pack to make. I feel like production would be easy on this. And then they sell like hotcakes if they're done well. So, like, to me, I just don't really understand not pushing more structure decks on Konami's end. Even if they wanted to go lighter, even if they came out one year and said, you know what, we're going to do 3 core sets a year instead of 4. 4 is just too many. We're making too many new cards, too much if it doesn't sell. That way we can make each individual core set more impactful, more interesting, without having to water any individual back ends of the sets down because, we've gotten through the good stuff but we have to fill slots, right? I would understand if they came from that standpoint. But they don't have to fill space in these, right? You pick one archetype, one theme, you give it 8 really good cards of support, and you move on. And they sell like hotcakes, and as long as you pick a good strategy and you execute the support decently well in terms of design, these things fly in my estimation. So unless something's misaligned between my impression on like how truly financially successful these are for Konami, maybe there's some disconnect there that I'm not understanding. But assuming these do well when they're executed well, I don't understand why Konami doesn't make like at least 3 of these a year. 3 seems like the number they should be aiming for. If we can get four sets as massive as core sets a year, they should be able to make 3, like staple, they have the same cards in every pack, structure decks a year. I just don't understand it, but that's just me. So, what is important here? What do I want to go over? So, I want to talk about the future of structure decks because there's multiple ways Konami can be very successful with structure decks that we've seen in the past for structure decks that I think were pretty successful. And again, I don't have numbers on this, so I can't officially say like what's sold like crazy, what's done better, what's done worse. But these appeared to me to at least be pretty successful structure decks overall. So obviously there are structure decks like the Blue Eyes. This is probably the most successful they can be. And honestly, this is a great example of it. This is one of the 5 most popular archetypes in the entire history of the game, combined with actually making the support take that archetype to like a legit, at least rogue level of play. And that's all you need is rogue level. You can say, I could go to a regional, have a good day, and top that regional. That is all you need to get to. And they did that here and then some. I think this actually took Blue Eyes probably a little step above that even. And that's really, really cool. This is probably the most successful formula for a structure deck. Next up, you have this, Fire Kings from last year. Now, this is part of Structure Deck R, so like it got a little bump there. But honestly, from the outside looking in, I never thought Fire Kings were like this crazy popular theme with the player base that like everybody's always wanted support for. There's always a small subsection of players that love an archetype for any archetype. Doesn't matter what it is, no matter how weird it may seem. There's always some small player base that goes for it. But when you just give them support and it's freaking awesome, it just literally, like, this came out, and then as soon as we realized we could pair them with the Albas engine, the Snake Eye engine, we realized, oh my god, Konami just printed a structure deck that basically just printed a tier 1 strategy right into the game. Now, pure Snake Eyes ended up being the better deck overall, but like, look at us now. We're looking at this archetype now and being like, oh, is Snake Eyes Fire King one of the best decks in the game? Tier 1 level? Like, just printing an awesome strategy really goes a long way, right? Especially if they're like almost tier 1 out the box, even if it's an archetype that's not like crazy popular. That's the second formula, is go above and beyond just like rogue level and go to that next tier of like legit tournament winning level. Next up, Trap Tricks. Now, this is a weird one because this is kind of like a mixture of the two, right? This is not an anime archetype, and this is not an archetype that nobody loves. This is a non-anime archetype that a lot of players love, whether it's nostalgia-based in that maybe some players think fondly of like hat format, whereas Trap Tricks was a pretty relevant engine back then. It also has waifu tax, which helps. Not going to lie, it helps. And then also making it a pretty high-end rogue deck, right? Combining, and that's the general notion too, is in all of these, you come back to it and you're like, if you're going to do it, even if it has these other selling points, right? Anime, nostalgic deck for other players, that's not anime-based. Even if it's whatever else we're going to talk about, if you also just make them at least rogue or like solid rogue, that sweetens the pot even more, right? And that's why we saw Trap Tricks also be what I assumed to be a pretty successful structure deck. I thought this structure deck did perform pretty well. Next up, Albas. Now this one's a really cool one in my opinion because we don't see too many of these, but these are lore-based structure decks, right? 2 lores ago, when it was Albas and Ecclesia lore, Albas was just a weird card. He was just weird. He just existed. He didn't really have a great home. And then the Albas Strike structure deck came out, and it immediately became one. It had like the high-end competitive potential that like Fire King had, but also it actually turned like a centerpiece of the lore and gave him his own archetype. So you also combine, it has a little bit of that anime aspect to it, where like people love the anime, people love the lore behind it. They took something that like already had been building this lore and finally put a face to the name and actually made them able to transfer over to the competitive side of the game. And this deck still sits around as a really good deck. So is there a world where they do something like that with Diabellstar, right? Diabellstar is part of the engine with Snake Eye. It could be part of the engine when Azamina comes out for other strategies. Who knows? But those aren't her own archetypes. She is just a card in those archetypes. Is there a world where they try to build a legit strategy that really, really focuses in and centralizes around Diabellstar? I think that could be so cool if they do that. And I think it would be very successful, especially if it's pretty competent competitively. I think that would be a huge moneymaker if they would go the same route that they did here. I don't think they did anything like that for Visa Starfrost, and they maybe should have, and this could be a good time for them to do it, because it's also Diabellstar, so they also even add to the bonus of like a little bit of waifu tax still. Like, that could be crazy. So, I definitely think something like that could be really, really, really cool. And the last thing, as far as like huge money, like a huge like basis that I think they could go with for a new structure deck that like is going to sell like hotcakes, no questions asked, is brand new archetypes. Now, this one's a little bit weird because we don't currently have a anime going on that like correlates directly to our game. They have sevens going on, but they play a whole separate game. They play Rush Duel, so they can't necessarily transfer that over unless they wanted to make a TCG version of one of those archetypes. That could potentially work. But even going back to Vrains, like, is there ever a world where they just turn around and say, you know what, let's make an Armatos Legio structure deck. It's going to have more than 8 brand new cards in it. Or maybe what if they get 8 new cards in this set, and then in the next core set they get 2 to 4 new cards that also help push them to the next level. And this is just kind of the setup for the new support coming. They could do something like that. This is an archetype I've been asked about every single time I have a discussion about anime cards that are not in the TCG. This is the number one thing that gets brought up, and I don't blame them. This is the coolest, fullest archetype that has never been printed. So would they do something like this? I get it's a little bit harder because we don't have a modern day anime that correlates with the TCG, but still they could mess around with something like this. And definitely I think a lot of players would stick to it and get really into it. So those are like the 4 breakdowns for me, like really high competitive level, nostalgic, even though it's not anime, waifu tax helps, a lore-based structure deck with like current lore and what's going on, and a brand new archetype being totally printed straight into a structure deck. That way a new archetype comes out, if it's also a little bit competitively relevant, boom, 30 to 40 bucks for somebody to get a whole playset of all these cards, and like boom, the strategy's like Rogue and it's totally new. Like that's really, really cool if they're able to do something like that. So those should be the goals for Konami, and I think with a combination of these 4 strategies in like new structure decks, they should be able to just come up with 3 a year. Pick a really old, sad archetype like Fire King was, give them 8 spanking new cards, make them the next, high-tier competitive deck, and get them out there. Get them back on the horse. Trap Tricks. Pick a fan-favorite archetype in terms of design, waifu-wise, whatever, that maybe has some competitive nostalgia for them as well. Give them 8 new cards. Get them up to speed, right? Lore, give Diabellstar stuff. Armatos Legio, brand new archetype, that's really hype, and go from there. There's multiple from Vrains they could pull from to do structure decks for the next couple of years even, right? Which brings me to next year. The only structure deck that I believe like is not for sure, but like has a really high chance of coming next year is Cyber Dragon. Even though technically Konami did not do an official structure deck R this year, Blue Eyes was next in line for structure deck R. So even though they didn't call the Blue Eyes structure deck, Blue Eyes, you know, Advent of Eyes of Blue R, whatever, it was still next in line. I think that was more of a marketing thing, that it almost would have distracted from the fact that it's Blue Eyes by calling it Structure Deck R and kind of confused players on what the actual product was. But they still haven't strayed off the path, really, of this you know, the Structure Deck R series, which means Cyber Dragon should be next year. They skipped Atlanteans, but Atlanteans got support elsewhere, so nobody cares now. Now it's Cyber Dragon's turn. Should be Cyber Dragon next year. I hope it's real Cyber Dragon support. They haven't gotten support in like 5 straight years. No single like new Cyber Dragon cards. It is their time to finally get a really strong wave of support. I'd love to see that. Other than that, though, you know, I hope there's at least 2 next year. That's kind of where I'm at. I really hope there's at least 2. 1 for the beginning of the year, 1 for the end of the year. Even though I do think they could absolutely do 3 a year and go bang, bang, bang. 1 at the beginning of the year, 1 in the middle of the year, 1 towards the end of the year. And I think that would be totally fine. We end up with some of these weird gaps sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like the last couple months where we get a core set, they want to wait on a ban list, and we go 2 straight months, sometimes 3 straight months almost, without getting any new products or a new ban list to really shape, or maybe even if you get a ban list, sometimes it's a small one, sometimes the format's fine. And we end up in a weird spot where the game gets really, really stale because like nothing new is hit in like months and months and months, and it gets hard to stay excited in the game. These are small things, but they can go a long way, especially when they're sprinkled in at very strategically placed times to catch, you know, if it's a month and a half of no products, place that in between, and then it's only 3 weeks. That feels way, way fresher as we move forward, especially if it's some kind of even rogue level strategy that just gives extra little something exciting for players to get hype about in between, you know, big drops in the game. So I think it makes sense. I think Konami should move to 2, if not 3, again. And that's what I really hope for, because structure decks have to be super profitable for them. I just can't imagine a world where they're not. And it behooves me that they haven't been pumping that out harder. I just don't understand it. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. What other structure decks do you think make a ton of sense that maybe fit one of these categories, or maybe a different category that maybe I didn't think of as like a style of structure deck that's not anime, super high level competitive, lore based, new archetype, something that's not one of those? I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below on that stuff. Just any ideas for structure decks, and what do you think about 2 to 3 a year? Like, where do you want Konami to land? I'd love to hear where you guys end up there. But I'm out of here for today. Thank you so much for watching as always. Let me know your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel for more fun discussions like this one. I love doing these types of discussions and talking to you guys in the comments. So I'll see you there. Thanks for watching. Peace.